1st, 2019 at 7 p.m. If you would all please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do a roll call. Roy Newman. Carl Rogg. Here. Sandy Trussell.
Here.
Thomas Haddock.
Here.
Jeff Haas.
Here.
Tanner, yes. Anthony Cable. Did all the board, we have quorum, all the board members present get a chance to read meeting minutes from last meeting?
Yep.
Could I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Do we need a formal vote on that?
You do need a vote. It can be a voice vote though.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Minutes are approved. We do have a pretty jam-packed agenda. Before we move on, I just wanted to, we will let everyone speak who wants to speak. We will ask you to stay brief, Joe. We'll get through it. I know people may have different opinions and stuff, but we'll ask you to come up, speak, state your name. We'll go case by case, so you all have an opportunity depending on what your specific interest is. But I just ask that you guys bear with us and be patient as we kind of work through it. So.
Thank you. With that, I'm just going to kind of jump right in. We do have 4 cases tonight. They are all somewhat related in the fact that they involve the Manhattan Harbor community down on Manhattan Harbor Boulevard. So I'm going to jump right into the first case. The first case, well, before we get into all of this, I want to make sure that, just to clarify for the record, we have done legal notices. Notice of this meeting was also mailed out to all the residents, all the property owners on Manhattan Boulevard. It was placed in the Campbell County Recorder, and it was also announced with City Council. This also has been advertised as a public hearing, so you as Planning Commission members, if you choose to assume the responsibilities of the Board of Adjustments, you can do so, because you are looking at stage 1 plans tonight. And it has been properly advertised as a public hearing. Okay. With that, I'm going to jump into the first case. The first case does involve some revisions to your overall concept plan, but also some revisions to your pattern book. And you've periodically gotten revisions to your pattern book as new segments of the project have come online. And you're going to see some of those tonight. So we want to make some changes to the pattern book, get that ready for those next parts of the development to come on board. The pattern book changes in and of themselves will need to go to City Council. So your recommendation will be to forward that information on to City Council and however you choose to go through it. We will look at the subsequent cases as conditional upon the language that you approve and what council ultimately adopts. Okay. With that, I'm going to jump right into this first case. I'm going to back up a minute. This is case 003-19-S1P-26 and case 003-19-TXA-31. That's your text amendment. Okay, so I want to go backwards in time and really kind of just refresh your memory, or actually take you back through time, on when this development first came about. It actually was started, the dialogue for it started around 2003, but in 2008 you saw basically a first full concept of the project. It was a 72-acre development, mixed-use development, along what used to be called Dodge Street. It had the commons in the lookout area. Those were envisioned to be mixed use and multifamily, and the vistas over here were envisioned to be estate homes. That ultimately ended up flipping, and you had the single family homes more in the commons and the lookout, and the vista became the apartments that are under construction, the Tapestry right now. But at that same time, you also came forward and said, we want a community theme or a pattern book, because you really wanted to define the vision and you wanted to enforce a higher level of code standards that really focused on that vision and that ambiance that you wanted to create with this project. So in 2013, you did a minor revision to that concept plan, and you shifted the location of the single-family homes and the multifamily units. You started developing different versions of the pattern book, and it was amended as each phase was brought online. In 2015, you saw the Gateway development, which is under construction right now. You also saw the transitional sites start to evolve in terms of the concept plans, or the actual stage 1 plans for the Boulevard Flats, which we're just waiting for construction to start on those. And then in 2018, you had the Vistas, which was the Tapestry multifamily development. You also had some amendments to the transitional sites for the Boulevard Flats as they got into a little bit more detail with those. I want to kind of jump into the transitional site of the Boulevard Flats for a minute. So you originally had a concept that had basically 5 buildings, which stopped at lot 7.
9.
No, originally it stopped at lot 7.
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. You recognized at that point, those were large buildings, you recognized at that point you needed to transition down to those single-family homes, okay? So basically at that point you introduced a blend on lots 7, 8, and 9 of a 12-family unit and then a 4-family unit, okay? So you had the 12-family unit and then the 4-family unit, and then this is a concept plan of that 4-family unit next to, actually that's the 4-family unit. So just kind of showing that has what you've already approved, okay? So kind of let's walk through what the requested changes then right now are. So this is the concept plan, it is on the back table. We have had some revisions to that and what you've got on the back table is the original one. That staff has gone back and forth with this development to make some of those changes, and I'll walk you through some of the pressures that we've kind of already put on this developer. So within the commons area, they're adding, increasing the number of 4-family units, which you see in the pink, and then also in the green, adding in 2-family units. Okay, so these would be side-by-side kind of 2-family units that are really positioned to look a lot like the single-family homes, but they're 2 units together. Then we also look over to that, so that's in the commons area. So you're transitioning down from the large buildings into a 2-family unit and then into your single-family homes. Picking back up at the lookout, you have 1 single-family home that's been constructed. The other 2 lots have already sold. Again, starting that transition back up with some 2-family units. So this would be 2 2-family units. And then getting into the multifamily structures, okay? So you transition down and then transition back up. With that, then we need to kind of, so that's basically the overall concept change. The individual details of those developments you'll see in separate cases tonight. So we'll actually get into the stage 1 plans for each of those. The pattern book change has got some additional changes, and with that I'm going to switch over to a Word file and actually walk you through your pattern book changes. Okay, so we're just going to scroll down through these, and if at any of them you want to stop and make some additional comments or revisions, we are happy to edit them on the fly for you. Your table of contents does change. We will do a final update of that when we are complete. We've indicated that we did a reformat in 2016. You're making some area adjustments in 2019. Okay. There were some minor typos that we kind of fixed throughout the whole document. They're highlighted in the materials that you have. I'm not going to go through every one of those in detail. Just some formatting issues.
There's a typo right there.
I can't spell there, and I'm going to correct that one right there. Thank you. I can't see that far, so you have to help me down at that end. But I'm looking at a screen here. Was that the one you caught?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And then kind of continuing on down. On this one, we did drop the word design because it's the commercial structures, not the design, which must be in compliance. You will see throughout some of, we've been able to, I'm going to pause for a minute. Just for the record, our newest planning commission member, Mr. Yes,
Yeah.
Has joined us.
And so sorry to join late.
That's okay. That's all right. We just want to make sure you're on the record as having been here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so continuing on down through the Riverfront Commons. Again, those are just typos that were corrected. And if I'm going too fast, tell me. Again, that's just typos. Okay, now we're starting to get into some of the meat. Okay, so on the signature site, we've added a new image based on the image that's been provided for us and approved. Well, I'm sorry, the signature site has not been totally approved yet, but we do have a concept for it now. Your transitional site, we now have an image in there for your transitional site, but we've also changed the language here, okay? Where the transitional site is going to be lots 2 through 15 of the commons, okay? And then we talk about what each of the lots will have. The transition from multi-story, multi-family buildings beginning at lot 7 and continues along down through lot 15. These buildings will systematically reduce in size from 4-family structures to duplex buildings. The duplex structures will be of similar size, height, and character as the single-family homes. The multifamily structures will have a combination of at-grade and lower-grade off-street parking at a minimum ratios of 1 spot per unit. 4-family and duplex units will also have garage parking at an average of 1.25 per unit. Additional guest parking of at least 1 space for 6 units will be accommodated. That's similar to what the language is that you had in there before, it's just a little more clear. Okay. Your gateway site, we actually added in an image of what it actually, a rendering of that site that's under construction. And then moving into the lookout, okay? The lookout, you have a new section for the multi-family homes at the lookout. You had a single-family section. We now have a multi-family section, okay? There were some changes to this based on the pushback that we were giving to the developer to try to get the duplexes in there first, the transition back up to the larger buildings. So these will range from duplexes up to 16-unit multifamily structures. The units will consist of 2 and 3 bedroom units. There's going to be at least 1 accessible unit within each structure that contains 4 or more units. Okay. Each 10 to 16 unit structure, which was the larger ones, will feature an internal courtyard or street level garages, including the applicable accessory or accessible spaces that need to be there. The next section is the bend or the vistas. This has been called a lot of different names over the life of this project, and so we've kind of added them all in there. Some people call them the bends, some people call them the vistas, some people call them the narrows. They're kind of all the same thing. What we did there was clarify the parking. That parking item was inadvertently omitted, so we've added in that same ratio that's carried forward throughout the entire development. The residential guidelines continue to apply. The single-family architecture, other than some typos in there, those have not changed. Those have stayed. We did strike as explained on sheet B2A because there is no longer a B2A. I apologize, I didn't catch that. And then That was just a typo there. But your single family stays the same. In your multifamily, we did make a little bit more detailed items. Okay. Within the townhouses or the side-by-side, basically the duplexes, you can have zero setbacks, okay? But the multi-story buildings, there is some minimum setbacks on that, and we're going to talk about those setbacks here, okay? I'm going to come back and repeat to you in some of the subsequent discussion, actually Kurt will, talking about some of the setback items. That is important because since we've gone under construction, we've had some feedback from the Corps of Engineers, okay? While we always knew we had to avoid the TOA slope for the flood wall, they'd like a 15-foot buffer where there's not a building being built within that TOA slope as well. And so that does affect some of the setbacks, and some of the buildings had to be pushed back closer to the river to avoid that TOA slope of the flood wall. So you are actually going to see in a subsequent case tonight a discussion about a variance on the rear yard setbacks because of that TOA slope. Okay. Keeping the same item in the multifamily that's in the single family, a lot of glass, a lot of metal, some brick, stone accents, some textured or colored concrete, lots of the same features that you see in those single family homes, again, designed to keep that high level design. Okay. Again, we clarified the multifamily parking so that that's a little bit clearer. And then, okay, so I want to get down into the driveways and curb cuts a little bit. We did have a variance that was granted for the lookout area with respect to the driveways. And this was granted by the Manhattan Harbor Architectural Review Committee. The driveways, the common stays the same. Within the lookout, they've varied and said, okay, you don't have to do the entire driveway in brick pavers, but we do want the accents on the sides of the driveways to be some type of architectural significance. So some bricks on the sides, some runners on the sides of some stamped concrete. We want that added edge still to, while the center might be fine, we want that added edge to the side. We also clarified the sidewalk area, the area that we would deem to be public rights of way, because those are things that long term the city of Dayton may maintain. And we wanted to make sure that that was a standard pavement in their books, basically. So we didn't want somebody to do brick pavers all the way to the street. We went from the sidewalk down to be your traditional concrete. But we allowed them to do a row of cobblestone runners at least 16 inches wide on each side of the first 20 feet of all driveways, which is basically the length of the driveways. We also re-emphasized the landscaping plan for each phase shall be designed and submitted to the Manhattan Harbor Architectural Review Committee. This is the same requirement that's in there for the single family homes. We're requiring the multifamily units to do that same level of detail and submit it to the same committee, which is they're very intense on what they want in terms of plantings. And that is your pattern book. So jump back over. So just kind of refreshing, we've added in some information about the signature site, the gateway site, the transitional site. You see the lookout multifamily homes, which you're going to start to see a little more detail about. You've got the bend and the vistas, which we also refer to as the narrows, and then your pattern book. And with that, staff's recommendation is to approve the revised concept for the commons and the lookout sub-areas and to approve the complementary revisions to the pattern book. Revisions to the pattern book shall be forwarded to the City of Dayton Council for further acknowledgement. The supporting information and your basis for your recommendation is the amended plan, and the pattern book is consistent with the City of Dayton Comprehensive Plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision regulations. The amended plan and pattern book is consistent with the overarching plan previously adopted for this mixed-use development. And I would like to open it up for any comments or questions you have of staff. The developer is, one of the developers is here tonight. If you have any comments or questions for them, but that actually might be more appropriate for when we get to the stage 1 plans. You may also, you can make a determination on this one, this part of it now. This is your first 2 cases that are side by side, or we can, you can hold off and make your recommendation after all of them.
We can go ahead and hear the second case.
Okay, all right, we can do that. Okay, does anybody need a break? I kind of put that in there between all of these because it's going to be a long night.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You want to do this one?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Cindy. If anybody needs, I do have some paper copies of the draft pattern book changes. And this is basically so we have a total of 3 sub-areas that we're going to talk about. So initially we're going to talk about River Commons. So this is 00319 S1P 27. As we saw in the beginning of the slideshow, we did a legal notice for all the cases in one ad, so everyone knows about it. That means the Kendall County Recorder or is nearby. So this is the River Commons. We're looking at the stage 1 areas. There we go. So this is basically what we have right now. We have these transitional structures going from the mixed-use multifamily, 4-family down to 2-family or duplexes, however you like to call them. We've already discussed this a little bit. I'll move quickly through the things that I think we've already talked about. If anybody wants me to back up, just raise a hand or say something. The proposed plan now, we had a couple already approved a few months ago on the lots to the west. Now we're moving on, so that was lots 7, 8, and 9. Now we're going 10 to 15. Basically, these are, like I said, the transitional structures. We're scaling down from the higher density multifamilies down to these 2 families, and then on down to single family homes. This would be the 4-family unit. It's a garage is at grade at the street, and then there is parking underneath as well. This would be a 2-family. It's kind of very similar in design to the single families, which have courtyard driveways, but these are actually duplexes. Here's a site plan. Sorry.
Can I make a request? Can
Sure.
we quit calling them duplexes? You wouldn't believe the negative connotation that gets, and I've talked to Brendan about this.
Okay.
People have a vision of a duplex as an old flat apartment building with 2 families in it renting. Now, I know that's not what we're doing here, but you'd be surprised at the lashback you get on it.
Well, I apologize for that, but I'm not.
I'm just suggesting.
I hear you. I may still call them that because that's what I've always called them,
Okay.
and I'm not trying to sell anything. I call them.
He is though.
I'll call them 2 families, but we'll. I'll try to catch myself. Okay, so we have requested, or the developers requested setback. Some areas to be conveyed to the development because, as Cindy was talking about, we had to move things, and then there's the river walk behind these, and this is the we would need to do a variance if the conveyance doesn't happen. I'm not sure how we want to work that tonight, but
So let me jump back in here then for a minute. So the developer has actually asked for some additional property to be conveyed from the city to the rear area of the lots to try to avoid the need for a variance. But if for some reason that property cannot be conveyed, and until we get the final design of the Riverwalk, we can't really pin that down too exactly right now. So what we'd like to ask for is if the conveyance of the additional areas does not occur, that a rear yard variance of up to 15 feet be granted. The specific size of that variance will be determined during the completion of the Stage 2 plans when we get a higher level of engineering. At that point in time, we also anticipate the Riverwalk plans to be there, and we can precisely set where that line is. But I don't have to bring this back to you if for some reason we can't exactly get that line where it needs to be. There may need to be a variance. And again, that's really been driven by the fact that we have to stay 15 feet off of the TOA slope for any structures per the Corps of Engineers. So right now, your rear yard setback for the townhomes and the row houses would be 20 feet. We would propose taking that down as small as 5 feet. I don't want it right up on the Riverwalk, and I think it'll be somewhere in between. But I wanted to bring that forward as a possibility.
And as you can see, there are the minimum setback distances in that chart there. Let's move on. We have some landscaping proposals. With the, when you're just looking at those site plans, it's kind of hard to picture what it's going to actually look like because they're just lines, and it kind of looks like a bunch of driveways. And this is, we requested that they show us a little bit more about how it's going to be landscaped and how we're going to screen these driveways and garage doors and how it's going to look. So we have a pretty good landscaping plan here that, in this case, you can see kind of a picture up in the left-hand corner of what would look like from the street, and then the bird's eye view from the aerial there. So the 4-family, and as our landscape architect called it, a duplex as well. We do have a proposed development schedule here. It's kind of hard to read, but it basically, you're seeing commons, 4 families being in construction next year and up on the market in 2021, and then another section of the other one going to a year later, and then similar kind of building schedule. They're looking at building the 2 families in 2019 this year and up to market, and then the multi-families would just be just down the line, each year building another one on up to 2026. So that's actually the narrows. That's on the same chart, but we'll get to the narrows in the next case. But we're looking at 2020 to 2022. So that's what we have for the commons as far as the Stage 1 development plan. Our staff recommendation is to approve these plans for lots 10 through 15. If necessary, grant the rear yard variance for up to 15 feet with the reciprocal access agreement for maintenance. And this is consistent with City of Dayton zoning ordinance, and the proposed improvements are consistent with the Manhattan Harbor pattern book as amended. We haven't amended it officially yet, but with the proposed amendments. So with that, I give this, open it up to any questions or comments for staff. And I can go back through the slides if you have something you want to look at. We do have some bigger pictures, and then, like I said, there's the...
You do have your developer here tonight, and I would like to introduce them. We have made some notes to the developer as well, and just for the general, everybody to understand, the development has to comply with all of Dayton ordinances, the regulations in the building codes. It has to comply with the Manhattan Harbor pattern book, and the approved Stage 2 plans and the final plats are required prior to the issuance of a building permit. We always disclose that to every developer that we have there. Brendan, would you like to add anything to this?
Well, the only thing that I'd like, first of all, thank you guys for taking the time to let us address you tonight. We've given Cindy and Kirk and group a whole lot of information in the last couple of months. So this has been an iterative process. Cindy, of course, and Michael and I have had an open mind. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say for the record that when him and our other board member that's present showed up.
Either are you
You
tonight?
may continue. Just-
Anyway, they've spent a tremendous amount of time working with our architects and our engineers to really kind of make sure that this thing gets modified appropriately. So we think we've given this a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness in our design, and we also have met many of the members that have lived in the area, so and we've been communicating with them as well. The only thing that we would ask on the stage, the phase one that you said, is we've talked to our engineers, and we're would rather not ask for a variance on that rear setback, and the only reason the only reason that we were looking for that to be, and you granted it on the first transitional phases that we did, was it allows us to access the rear of the building, so that we don't have to ask the city for a variance. It really just sort of limits our parking. It doesn't really do anything in terms of us gaining the land. In fact, we then have to take care of it. So that would be the only request that I would have on this first piece, and I'm not sure that we really need it on the other areas, Cindy.
I believe the Commons is the only place to do that. This body, though, does not have the authority to grant the land. That has to be done by city council. So that's why we've put staff has recommended we put the variance in there. We know it's the developer's preference is to have full control of that land, but we wanted to have kind of a second card in the deck in case council would stall on that, so that we would have that variance available, so that it won't hold up the development at that point. Ideally, yes, it would be in the city of Dayton's interest to convey that property. That's additional land that's on the tax base, but I simply cannot speak for how council will make that determination.
Perfect. That's the only request we have.
Okay. I will go back, and if you want to speak to some of the changes that we made on here with respect to the landscaping and the curb cuts. Some of the original concepts had individual driveways coming in. This is the two-family units, and I will make a note, and when we go back to the pattern book, if you wanted to give me a recommendation to scrub the word duplex out of there, I would be happy to do that. But to basically have these with a shared driveway coming in, so instead of two separate driveways, you get one coming in kind of a shared courtyard for each of these two structures. And then similarly to the four-family, you actually see a little bit of discrepancy between these two pictures. This was kind of the original concept with one large curb cut. Again, they've come back and given us some renderings, and we'll work out the details a little bit more than the stage 2 plans. But again, share that smaller common driveway coming in for all four of those structures. It is important to have this courtyard on the front of these structures because of the providing some units with ADA accessibility. And with that, if you had any public comments that you'd like to hear on this one before we go into our next one. This is on the commons.
Anybody would like to speak on the commons area, or even have opinions on the pattern book? You're welcome to speak now.
Okay.
Just to clarify.
I want to say something, and I apologize.
Just keep it brief.
My name's Bill Burns. First, I'm not going to tell the planning and zoning how to do their job, because you're doing an excellent job. And I'm not down here to badmouth the development, because I think it's a great development. I encourage it. Talked to this gentleman many times about, I think what will happen when this development happens, it'll make other things happen down the riverfront. What I'm concerned about, and I just seen the schedule, I don't want to see, and I strongly encourage it, I recommend, I suggest that the planning and zoning hold the developer to their schedule, because I don't want to see 2 and 3 developments down there half finished. The reason, what I'm saying is, now he's worked on a development down on Walnut Street now for some 2 years, and it's still not finished yet. So I have a concern that they're going to start 2 and 3 and 4 down there, And I don't think the citizens of Dayton deserve that, or the city of Dayton deserves that. So that's only my suggestion, the plan and zoning come up with some kind of recommendation that they don't start 2 and 3 different ones down there and leave them half finished.
Thank you. Everybody's duly noted.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to.
Can I,
Yeah, oh, no,
one
absolutely.
thing, I want to make sure that lot
Name,
16.
name, please.
Craig Richburger from Manhattan Boulevard. Lot 16 through lot 3 in the lookout area are going to remain single family. So lot 16, 17 is occupied, 18 through 21 are open. The rest are occupied in the commons. 1 and 2 are sold. 3 is the Hunt Lease residence. Those will remain single family, correct?
Correct. So if we go to the slide up here, we're talking about the duplexes up through lot 15, which is right here. The remainder of these will all be single-family lots. And then when we go over to the lookout, the first 3 lots will also remain single-family lots. That is as the plan that's currently proposed. Jump down to your schedule for a moment and let you speak to it. Okay, so on the schedule here, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit bigger. Hold on. Okay, that's a little bit bigger. So what we're seeing here is what the developer intends to do, because I had similar concerns and was questioning that as well. As each unit starts under construction, they won't start the other unit until they have some sale action on that first unit. So we don't have multiple half-started buildings under construction.
Can I just make a comment? I'm sorry to jump into our defense here a little bit. But when we got those plans approved, the Army Corps of Engineers gave us a verbal that we were able to go ahead and start. And we had a 7-month delay with the Army Corps of Engineers on that. That's number one. And there's a few other extenuating circumstances under that in terms of what the footings require, which I'm not sure you're fully aware of. I'd be happy to tell you what those were in terms of 570 piers under that building. So before we even went vertical, we were about a year into the process, just to make a note, that's all.
I respect that. I respect that.
I just want
What
you
I'm
to-
saying is, I don't want to see 2 or 3 developments down there half done and
I
not
don't
finished.
disagree, and I appreciate that, but I just wanted people here to understand, since you brought that up, why certain things happened. So I just want to make sure the record is clear on that.
That's
Go
fine.
ahead, Cindy.
No, it's okay.
I'm just suggesting to the planning and zoning board up there,
Fair enough.
because you can put anything on that schedule you want. I put down schedules every day, but sometimes they don't, it doesn't happen.
Well, the other reason why this schedule was created, and one of the main reasons that Cindy and Kurt wanted this, was because there's traffic patterns that they want to make sure when these other roads and the additional finishes need to be made. So that was one of the reasons, and we tried to be conservative rather than aggressive on those schedules. So I appreciate your concern, but I just wanted to make sure I got a statement out there.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, that's okay. I want to kind of drill down a little bit more on the schedule. There's a couple other pieces here that are important to you. One is kind of the square footage of each of these structures. The 4-family units, we're expecting those units to range from 1,500 to 2,150. The price range of those 4-family units will be $400,000 to $600,000. The 2-family structures, which I've got to purge that word from my vocabulary, I appreciate the comment on that. The square footage on that, 2,300 to 2,800. Again, when you combine 2 of those units together, that's very, very comparable to the single-family homes out there. The price point on those really will start at the $600,000 range and go on up to $750,000, depending on the finishes that are put in those structures. The multifamily units, again, similar in size to what where the 4 families are starting out. Not quite as big in terms of the spread, really 1,400 to 1,500. And again, the price point on those, $450,000 to $700,000. I point that out to you because these are very high-end finishes to get into that price range. So these are not what you're seeing in other developments in the region going on right now that are targeting a lower price point. While you cannot, I'm going to speak to the schedule. We do require that a developer provide us with the schedule, and largely so it's a talking point to push them through. We can't force them to put something under construction, okay? But we can look at that schedule in context of other items going on, like, for example, the Berry Street connector, which you'll hear us talk about in one of our later cases. And you can put some trigger points in that says, before you do this, you have to do that, okay? And one of the items that we do want to see is, and what we have asked with regards to this schedule is, we want to see a phased construction. We don't want to see all 15 lots go under construction at the exact same time. While we have that at the Tapestry, that is a different type of development, okay? These are individual units that will be sold individually as opposed to something that's going to be rented in mass. And so you want to finish, you want to get close to finishing one before you bring it online. It's very similar to how a subdivision would be developed. You don't see the entire subdivision go under construction at the same time. It's important because you don't want to flood the market with too many available properties at the exact same time. There is a science to this.
Joe?
Cindy, could you go back to that slide,
Yeah.
please? I don't quite have a grasp on how many units are involved with this, how many total units.
Okay, I'm going to let you.
Well, it depends on what our density is and what we do moving forward, but right now, we have, for this year slated, 16 units to go in the commons area. We have 10 plus now a couple duplexes that we're talking, excuse me, two families. Craig, I'll get this straight, it's going to be a while. 10 to 14 units in the lookout area, and a 14-unit minimum, and maybe 2 14s in the narrows, as it's called, area. Now, we're going to rename some of these, because we don't obviously like some of the names, so we've named our projects our own thing. So there would be minimum three structures started, one in each one of the phases.
I'm talking about when this goes to total completion, how many units?
It could be, if you added all three phases together, 170 units to
Okay.
200, including the narrows, which is about 100.
So 170 units plus the 270 down at Tapestry.
And
Thank
the
you.
amount of units that it's zoned for is 1,277. We're far below what the recommended or initial plans came in at. We're far, far below that now, because our densities are mostly 2- and 3-story structures now.
Now, by units, a two-family, not duplex, a two-family would be counted as 2 of those units, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was
So within
concerned
the commons area, you have, you've got 2 more buildings, each with 4 families in it, and then you have a series of 4 buildings, each of those is a 2-family unit. So that's what we're looking at in the commons area. And then I'm going to jump into, okay. And then we'll go through the other ones as we get to them. Because I was jumping in right straight
That's
into the narrows, and I'll let you do that.
Um,
Any other comments on the commons?
So one comment, probably not this, but when we first came down here, we were talking about 41 single-family homes. So you've increased the density way beyond that,
We're talking including the narrows. The narrows is 100.
and not counting the narrows, which wasn't even talked about back in 2015 when I was down here for the first time at the show. We were talking 41 units, plus who knows what's going to go on beyond where the narrows and the apartments that are further down by the harbor. But you're going from 41 to 170 to 200, right?
41 to, what do you mean 41?
Okay,
Because
let
if
me
there's
go-
41 lots, no.
There were 27 lots in the commons
No, there's
and 14
100.
in the lookout.
Okay, so this is the original, and again, I apologize, let me see if I can get little bit wider here. Okay, so this is one of the concept plans that would have been in existence at the time those single-family homes went under construction. And you do see a larger density of single-family homes in there, as well as the lookout. There's always been structures proposed at the Narrows. This is the area where the apartments are under construction right now, the vistas. You see another multifamily structure in here. You see multiple structures here. What has occurred in some of these units is the height has varied on these. Some of them were proposed that they could go as high as 12 stories. They've chosen not to do that. So we've got shorter buildings with less units in those. But in some cases, in this one, they're transitioning those down closer to the single-family homes. So the overarching density for the entire project, not unique to just what we're talking about tonight, is less than what was originally proposed for the Commons. I mean, for Manhattan Harbor. Specific to the Commons area, the density has changed within that sub-area, yes.
And back to your question, the Narrows is really outside of where the 41 lots are, just so we're clear, that's beyond Berry Street is what we're talking about, so the numbers I gave you included those numbers on top, which we're also presenting tonight, so you asked for I've given you the entirety of what we're presenting tonight.
Okay, with that, any other comments on this so far? Okay, we're going to jump right into the Narrows. I'm assuming that you did not want to take action yet on the Commons. You want us to keep going through everything?
Do we
and then-
want to take action? I mean, I think, take action on the site plan and this pattern book.
Do you want to, if you want to go back and do
I think that
that, I
would
can. Hold on a minute, let me get you back
We
to
don't get
that.
too ahead of ourselves.
It is totally up to you. Okay, so, let me go back. Okay, so this would have been the recommendation for our initial discussion, which was to approve the revised concept for the Commons and the Lookout sub-areas, and to approve the complementary revisions to the pattern book. Revisions to the pattern book shall be forwarded to the City of Dayton Council for further acknowledgement. The supporting information and the basis for the recommendations are here. I would amend our staff recommendation to request that we modify the pattern book to remove the phrase duplex and to do some final corrections on the typo that was caught earlier. And I would offer that up for consideration by the Planning Commission.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, absolutely.
That might be outside the purview of this group, and excuse me if things have already been addressed, as I'm somewhat new. Has there been traffic studies involved in what we think is going to happen with all
There have been a number of traffic studies that have been done throughout the life of this, and it does relate back to the densities.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit more about the traffic when we get into the Narrows item. That's really where we want to
Great, and I'm happy to
address
wait.
things.
Yeah.
But because the overarching density for the project has gone down, we don't see a traffic issue. There will be some traffic concerns during construction, and everybody's got to be aware of that, and we've got to do the best we can to try to protect the integrity of the residents that are already down in Manhattan Harbor as that construction is going on. And I will tell you, I am not hesitant to call these contractors. We do the building permits as well to rein in their contractors and keep things as calm as we possibly can for the residents down there.
Thank you, and I'm happy to hear more later. And then somewhat of a smaller detail, but important to me, and as I see kind of the site plans here, we're doing a great job of cramming a lot in, but keeping green space and quality of life items in here, along with the 2 trails, which is great. Can I ask about, and if it's the time for the landscaping specs and what's going on there on all of these setbacks and developments? Can we have native species? Can we have something that's hardy perennial mixtures, so they're easy to maintain and have ecological value.
Okay. You have a very extensive landscaping plan. You do have some specific trees that are already in the plan.
Lacy Hill.
Yeah, we typically don't do it on phase one, but
Right, that's what-
I pushed the envelope and said, I want to see it. All right, so I got feisty.
What they did is they asked us to provide the landscape plans with this, which is non-typical, but we thought it was good that you guys got the chance to look at it. Because we think we're actually, in some areas, actually increasing. When we do the single drive, single entries, it's created some really nice landscape in front of the building, so you don't see, just troves of driveways running down the street. Our goal is to try to eliminate the amount of entrances off of, according to Cindy and Kurt, off of Manhattan Boulevard, but the issue is there's 88 garages that we need on the front that have to be able to be accessed directly, but some of them we're trying to do underneath and park below the buildings, which you'll see in the narrows and in the first phase that we have done. So our intention is to try to keep the parking within the structure of the building and below, and then keep some additional green spaces up top. That benefits all of us.
There will be some additional landscaping on the Riverwalk, which will be a separate item. That'll actually work directly through council on that. The landscaping for this is very intense. We do have to acknowledge, with respect to the landscaping, the proximity of the river and the proximity of the flood wall. We can't plant trees up on the flood wall. Absolutely not. So the tree covering varies a lot. It's also very intense around the actual residential structures, simply because we do need to keep the plantings off of the flood wall. So we're very intense on that. And you can see by the landscaping that's out there now that you really do see, a lot occurring. You do get into some very, I'm going to jump on down to, in the pattern book here, and I apologize, I don't have the pages committed to memory. What we get into within each property, if you go down to page 19, they have to have, within the landscaping, they have to have a lace bark elm, they have to have other shade trees, clump trees, ornamentals, and then that entire horticultural plan has to go before the Manhattan Harbor Architectural Review Committee to review those plans, so that there's some consistency with the design. So we did have a variance that was requested for the Lookout single-family homes largely after the one was constructed. The developer at that point in time acknowledged they were having a really hard time fitting the number of plantings in. And if you recall, we went from 60-foot lots down to a 40-foot lot. We didn't reduce the number at that point in time, and that was pretty intense. So you do have a variance for the Lookout area, just reducing the quantity but not the quality of some of those plantings. And that's largely because you went from a 60-foot lot to a 40-foot lot. No problem. Good question.
Who chooses the plant material? The developer or the buyer?
Gail Frazier, right?
The original concept was lined out by Gail, but Gail hasn't been involved in it. It is actually proposed by the developer, but then it goes before the Manhattan Harbor Architectural Review Committee, and I'm going to tell you who's on that committee. And this is all in your pattern book.
And we've hired a gentleman by the name that South Bank Partners recommended. He did our gateway phase. His name is Ken O'Day. Did a great job for us on our designs here. He also did these preliminary plans for us on this. We're happy to show you anything that he prepares for us as well.
I guess really what I'm asking is say I'm a buyer. It doesn't matter, single family, two family, and I've got landscape opportunities that are between my building, garage, whatever, and the curb. is it a situation where you're working with a customer, and you bring this individual in and they propose a plan? Or does the customer, I'm just curious how.
Well, Craig, maybe you can weigh in. There's a homeowners association on that. I think we probably, anything major like that would probably have to go before.
Well, let me jump in on that one for a minute. So, in your pattern book, you have the Manhattan Harbor Architectural Review Committee.
Okay.
That committee is made up of 2 members appointed by the city, 1 member of the master developer, and 1 representative of the sub-developer. And then you have a 5th member who is an architect experienced with multifamily and single-family design. Your 5th member right now is one of the former members of your planning commission. And I can tell you he's probably one of your toughest scrutinizers of these plans when they come forward. So they have to actually submit their plans to this committee. This committee then reviews it. I have seen them reject things that they did not feel was at the level of detail and send them back to the drawing board. They're probably tougher than I am on coming through. And coming back to get approval for these items. So I feel like you've got the checks and balances in place to make sure you get a good quality investment in here.
There's no other questions. I'd like to entertain a motion for the first case.
Okay, so then I would ask to approve the recommendations with also the condition to, as printed, with also the condition to remove the word duplex from the pattern book and to make some minor administrative corrections in terms of typos and formatting.
I'll make the recommendation to approve the revised concept for the commons and lookout sub-areas and to approve the complementary revisions of the pattern book. Revisions to the pattern book shall be forwarded to the city council for further acknowledgement, and also to change the verbiage of the duplex. Was there another thing?
And minor administrative corrections for
Minor
typos and
administrative
formatting.
corrections.
And your supporting recommendations is as presented tonight, and also including the discussion that was held tonight as well.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
You will need to do a roll call vote.
Roy Newman,
Aye.
Paul Roth,
Aye.
Sandy Trussell,
Aye.
Thomas Haddock, Jeff Haas,
Aye.
Tanner, yes.
Aye.
And Kato, aye. Passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, so moving down into the commons, I'm going to ask the question a second time. Do you want to go ahead and make a motion with respect to the commons improvement, or would you like us to go the narrows to you?
I think they're different.
Yeah, I would go ahead and entertain a motion for that, given the variance and all that's attached to it.
So the staff, just to repeat, the staff recommendation on the commons is to approve the submitted stage 1 plans for Manhattan Harbor lots 10 through 15, and if necessary, grant a rear yard variance for up to 15 feet with a reciprocal access for maintenance agreement. The supporting information and the basis for the recommendation is the submitted plan is consistent with the City of Dayton zoning ordinance, section 9.20, the plan requirements for stage 1 plans. Proposed improvements are also consistent with the Manhattan Harbor pattern book as amended.
Do I have a motion?
I can't do that first.
Motion to approve the submitted stage 1 plans for Manhattan Harbor, lots 10 through 15, and if necessary, grant a rear yard variance of up to 15 feet with reciprocal access for maintenance agreement.
Okay, and the supporting basis for that would be as presented tonight, and then also based on the discussion and additional information that came forward tonight. I think you need a second for that one.
I'll second it.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just have a question. So you originally did not want the 15 feet variance?
No, the reason we want it is, here's where the issue comes in. We're going to be using that for part of our access to park. That's the only reason why. Then it becomes a maintenance agreement. Who owns the land and who cares for the land? Our designers have said, well, you know, the city then would have responsibility for that. All we're saying is, as part of our ability to access, rather than having a variance, it would just be cleaner title-wise for us, to our lenders, to be able to access our building from the rear, and that's the underneath side, remember, from the rear. On the prior phases, you had approved that, so we're not asking for anything extraordinary here. And it's not a land grab of any sort, it's just a matter of us for access. Is that accurate, Jim and Jeff?
I think we're kind of talking about two different things. I think Cindy explained it well last time. We don't know where that trail's going to be, and there's certain setbacks to where that house is, and certain setbacks from the front where the levee is. We're not allowed to build over the old levee, and she's got a 20-foot setback there. So if we get pushed back, we don't want to be up against that trail. So we don't want the building and the trail right there. So she's just putting that in there as a tool for when we build that trail. We may or may not need that variance. She just wants it in there so when we figure out where the trail is, we can make our building not be right on top of that trail. Is that correct? Is that a good?
Yeah, Jeff, could you identify yourself just for the record?
Jeff Flaherty with Cardinal Engineering. I'm the applicant's engineer.
Yeah, we got a motion, we got a second. If there's no further comments, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Carl Rock.
Aye.
Sandy Tressel.
Aye.
Thomas Haddock.
Aye, sorry.
Jeff Haas.
Aye.
Tanner, yes. Anthony Cato, aye. Roy Newman.
Aye.
Motion approved, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody need a break? We're gonna keep on going. Okay, stretch now. All right, we're gonna jump right into the narrows. This is an area where you have not seen any proposal other than the original concept plans. We're not tweaking anything. This is kind of what you're gonna see here now.
So the Narrows is about 5 acres. This is the site plan. These are multifamily. The driveways, you can kind of see, let's see, I gotta go picture, let's go back. Basically 12 two-bedroom units each, total of 7 buildings. This is what it's going to look like, front and back elevation. This is another site plan. The parking is underneath, so we have finished floor levels and lower levels. These are basically open underneath, so we don't need to meet the same flood requirements. Each building is about 2 feet above the base flood elevation, which is the law in the city of Dayton. Each city kind of sets their own requirements as far as base flood elevation. Some cities are at 0, some are as much as 3. All of these are, you know, about 2 over. Or no, I take that back. These are much higher than that.
Because
Well,
raises
I'm
past
gonna
berries.
I'm sorry,
I'm
I
gonna
missed-
jump in on this.
I'm thinking of
So-
something else here.
So about 498 is your base flood
Yeah.
elevation. The lowest structure that we have is building number 4, where the lower level or the parking garage is 499.5. Your pattern book requires that all of the living spaces and any supporting mechanicals be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. That will occur in the design of these, which will have a small section of that lot number 4 that won't be below the base flood elevation, but it will be within your 2-foot freeboard in there. It's important that these lower structures, and I'm going to go back to the rendering. Okay, you see that lower structure does have some openings on it, and it does flow towards the river. The mechanicals will all be above that 2 feet of freeboard in there. And then the living space is well above that requirement. This is actually a pretty high section. There's a lot of fill that went in on this one, it's pretty high above the base flood elevation. You go down between the buildings, and you can see it on the site plan that you have more detail in front of you, the 11 by 17s. You go down a ramp and then into each of these structures to get into it. And it varies kind of, sometimes it's to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes it's both directions as you go through. But it was very critical to us to go through and see where this was with respect to the flood elevations on it. That's something we monitor very closely across the whole Manhattan Harbor development. And by defining it, you want to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. That's probably closer to the 500-year flood zone as opposed to the 100-year flood zone. So you've got a lot of buffer in there.
That's flood data from 1988.
That is flood data from 2014. We had updated flood data in 2004, and it was updated again in 2014.
And if you know how the development goes, as you approach Berry Street from the west, heading east, the road goes up to the top where Berry Street's going to access. That part where the Narrows is, which she is representing now, is at that higher level. It's much closer to the 500-year level that Cindy's referring to right now.
This section of the Manhattan Harbor development actually has, in terms of the flood zones, has a letter of map amendment on it from FEMA that says it's out of the flood zone. So while some of the earlier sections, they go lot by lot by lot, this one is actually, this entire section has a letter of map amendment on file that says it's out of the base flood elevation. And you have taken that extra step with your pattern book and putting that 2 foot in there, gives that added buffer in there should that number ever change. You've got 2 foot of freeboard in there, which is a very healthy thing to have.
And as we were just mentioning, the Berry Street connector, we do have this drawing of it here. As the Narrows is constructed, then this connector will go in there. This connection was approved in 2015. And this is a similar idea to the previous presentations as far as the landscaping. You have far fewer curb cuts in this area because of the driveways accessing 12 units instead of 1 each. So it's going to be a lot more landscaping visible from the street. The Narrows is a pretty simple plan because it's 7 identical buildings, so there's not much else really to talk about. So we'll just move on to the final slide here. The staff recommendation is to approve the submitted stage 1 plans for Narrows and Manhattan Harbor, and the supporting information is the submitted plan being consistent with the City of Dayton zoning ordinance, and the improvements are consistent with the pattern book as amended and just approved. So at this point I can give it over to the Planning Commission for any questions or comments.
I'll open it up to public comment if anybody wants to say anything. Joe, Neary?
So this is an additional 84 units on top of the 170 in the other section, correct?
No, that's incorrect. The other section is not 170. The other section is potentially up to 70. This is beyond that. So this, when you ask for the totals, I give you both what we're presenting tonight, both the Narrows and
the commons and the lookout. I thought you were just referring to the
commons. That's why I think there was a
lookout.
little bit of a drawback on that, but this is beyond the Berry Street. So
Right, I thought you were just referring to the first 2 rather than all 3.
I must have misunderstood your question. When you asked, I gave the entire amount of what we're presenting tonight.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to the Berry Street connection because this is one that we've had some comments on already tonight. We anticipate the Berry Street connection. They were actually talking about possibly connecting it last year. They didn't quite make it that far. So I would expect it to be a topic of the summer season this year. We did go ahead and put in there that we anticipate that the Berry Street connection will be ongoing at the same time as the construction of the Narrows. I think that's critical and something that we will push back to the overarching developer, that we want to see that completed at the same time the Narrows is completed. I do think it would be a good item to have for construction access while the Narrows is undergoing construction, while you would still bring your heavy equipment and your materials in through Manhattan Harbor Boulevard from either one end or the other. It would be difficult to kind of take them up this very steep grade of Berry Street, but I do think for day-to-day construction activity, having the framework in for the Berry Street connection will be very helpful for the overarching developer. So we will again push back to, it's Nelson Stark will be the one that will be constructing this, that we want to see this, and I know Michael's already started down that path as well, that it's time to pull the trigger on the Berry Street connection.
You mentioned have it completed by the end of the Narrows construction schedule, which I know you guys, we're not holding anybody to, but it's 2025. Are we talking
Yeah.
the end of Narrows?
Well, you'll probably see
buildings
it.
or?
You'll probably see it similar to what you see at the Tapestry right now. So the Tapestry does not have its the section from Berry Street down to the Tapestry does not have its final layer of asphalt yet. You'll see it's probably, it's an inch or two short right now. You'll get that same thing on Berry Street. You don't want to put down that final layer until you're really done with a lot of your major construction, because you risk the potential of tearing it up. So I don't want to say it's going to be final until you're getting close to the end of your Narrows, but we do want to see it shelled in and usable for construction traffic at a much sooner date.
There's no other public comment. Does the board have any questions, concerns, comments?
Will these be condominiums?
All for sale.
All for sale.
I don't know if Craig will let me use that word, Craig?
Okay, I'm just.
We don't want to strike that word from this, and we're okay with condos.
This board cannot control ownership, okay? You cannot control whether something is apartments or whether something is condominiums. But what we will say is the amenities that are designed for this is designed for, owner occupancy. Whether an owner decides to rent it, I can't control that, and nor can this body. But it doesn't have the amenities that we're seeing down at the Tapestry, which is geared towards rental units. So while we can't control ownership, it is designed for the amenities that are common with owner occupancy.
Cindy, can I ask
Yes.
a question about the street? You had mentioned that the street wouldn't be completely finished, but last year they finished our street, as you know, in the Commons area. I was curious why they did it so soon, since there's still a lot to be built there.
Because you've got some really nice houses and we wanted to see the street finished. We do recognize that they if something does happen, they would have to make some repairs. That's also why they've kind of got a backdoor entrance for the Tapestry
That's right.
coming in from the marina side,
Okay.
to try to keep that nice presence there in front of the single-family homes.
Is there a plan to fix that street down there by the marina? Because you can only go so far, and then
Yes.
it looks like a bomb hit it or something.
Yes, there is more plans to continue and connect that street all the way through. So there'll actually be 3 primary connection points.
Mhm.
One at O'Fallon,
Right?
yeah, and then Berry Street, and then, Michael, help me out, what's the very end?
Route 84th.
Back to Route 8.
Okay.
And right now, just so you can know for your own edification, the guys that are building the Tapestry, most of their stuff is coming in through that way, so that's a good thing that it's not all the way done yet. Because ultimately, that's probably the most heavy lifting construction that's going to be down there. The buildings we're building are, 12 families, so it's like building a few glorified homes. We're not going to have the level of traffic they're going to have, it's not even close. And we can try to keep our access truck coming from the backside rather than the front side. That's an easy, we're trying to make you happy. That's gonna be-
Okay, so I will repeat the same information that I repeated before, that the development has to comply with the Dayton ordinances, regulations, and building codes. The development also has to comply with the Manhattan Harbor Pattern Book, and that the approved Stage 2 plans and final plats are required prior to the issuance of a building permit. That's just additional information to the applicant. Yes, that's my disclaimers.
Okay, based upon the information from staff, I make a motion to approve Stage 1 plans for Narrows at the Manhattan Harbor.
And your supporting basis is as presented tonight, along with the additional information that came forward tonight in the discussion.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote.
Yes, please.
Roy Newman,
Aye.
Carl Robb,
Aye.
Sammy Trestle,
Aye.
Thomas Hatter,
Aye.
Jeff Haas,
Aye.
Henry S.
Aye.
Gail, aye. Motion passed.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have, if you need another, offer one more chance for a break. Okay. You have one more packet, and I do apologize that it was late getting to you, largely because we pushed the developer very heavily to make some additional revisions to this. And this is the lookout area. We are prepared to bring this forward to you tonight. It was advertised appropriately. I just wanted to confirm with you that you're prepared to hear this case tonight. Okay, with that, we're going to jump right in and present to you some of the revisions to the lookout area. Again, this is kind of similar to the commons area. I apologize, the image up there is not of, the image up there is a nose.
That's a ship. So, this is the lookout. Currently, there's a house in the lookout right now. We're going to be transitioning from single family onto these multi-family houses. Similar architecture, the two families. We call them duplexes now. It's gonna slide as a
Formerly known
duplex.
as.
I heard that.
So they're similar in size and design to the other ones, and then we'll have these multi-families as well. So it's scaling back up in density from the single family. We have the two vacant lots, which I believe are sold, and then the existing house, and then next to that is where the new two families will go, scaling up to the multi. Now, I put this in here before that there was going to be some discussion, but then you mentioned something different about the property line, so is that a new?
Well, we talked with the owners that own lot number 3, so I'll let you finish your points on
Okay.
it, because we don't think we're modifying that. We think we're gonna maybe put another provision on the record that. we're
Okay.
gonna
Yeah,
try to work with
I had a
the
slide for that,
neighbors.
but I think we don't need it right now. So anyways, this is basically the layout, how it's scaling up in density. These don't have the lower levels like in the narrows, so our finished floor levels are all, as much as, 10.
These are
11.
well above
Yeah,
your 2 feet of freeboard. They're actually
Yeah.
closer to 3 in some cases.
well, the number 7 is over
Yeah.
10 feet above the base flood elevation. So again, these are safely above and out of the flood zone. Similar landscaping styles, the multifamilies have front-loading driveways, so we have the garages, and then we have these plantings that are proposed. The two families are going to use a courtyard style, so you actually have 4 units, but only 1 driveway. So that, it's just nicer than having just a row of driveways. So it's a nicer looking streetscape. So here's the proposed development schedule for this section. We're looking at the construction of the 2 families to begin next year and go for sale in the following year. And then as we move east down the street, kind of each one gets built as previous ones get sold on into 2026. You'll also notice that they occupy several lots, so the lot sizes are changing. Instead of having, these 16 lots, it's actually now 7 buildings over 16 lots, so it's actually...
18 months.
Is it 18? I'm sorry.
18, that's okay.
Just doing quick math.
Yeah, that's all right, that's all right.
Yeah, so we're consolidating some, and that'll go on the final plat, which we can approve at the next week. We need to have a meeting for that. So, that's the lookout. Our staff recommendation is to approve these plans. Again, they're consistent with the City of Dayton zoning ordinance, Article 9, Section 920, plan requirements for Stage 1 plans. The proposed improvements are consistent with the Manhattan Harbor pattern book as amended earlier and approved. And our additional information is the same as the others, that the development comply with the ordinances, regulations, building codes, Manhattan Harbor pattern book, and approved Stage 2 plans and final plats are required prior to issuance of a building permit. And those do not require a public meeting. We do those in-house. So this was the Stage 1 plan approval. So I give it to the Planning Commission for discussion.
Any questions from the audience?
You get copies of some of these schedules, I don't think, when you handed this out, I don't think it had that.
Those are not in the schedules, but we can provide them to Michael and tell him, let him get those to you.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Are all the units we're talking about fair market value, is that correct? All units?
Okay, so in this unit here, and again, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit more.
Let me go back to the slide.
That didn't help.
That's a little better.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the two-family units, again, we're seeing the square footage of these range from like 2,300 to 2,700. The price range being 600 to 750, very similar, actually identical to what we saw on the previous two-family units. The multi-family units, they'll range in square footage from 1,300 to 1,670. The price range on those would be 400,000 to 600,000, so a little bit different. But that's kind of the price point. Again, these are they're not subsidized. These are fair market values, but they are higher end developments. We would see the construction for the lookout area starting in 2020 and then continuing on through 2026. Obviously, if the sale goes quicker, the construction will proceed quicker. It just really depends on.
I think the only caveat I'll say here is this schedule's a little off. We are planning on starting a portion of this year, and I spoke with the neighbors on Lot 3, and I just want to add something on the record. I made an agreement with them today. They know that there's going to be multifamily 3 lots away from where their building is, and we have two families in between, and they had asked if I could accelerate the schedule on those 2 so they wouldn't have to be looking at multifamily. And I said I would accommodate them. I said I would make sure that I did that as part of the phase 1 construction. The only thing that he asked me to do, or Beth and Jerry, was that I do both of them in the first year. I'd asked if I could do one in the first year, one in the second. What I have committed to him is I will begin both of them or pull both the permits in the first year. I likely won't start them at the exact same time. So I'm asking them, because we had a conversation about an hour and a half or 2 hours ago, that I start the first one when we start the construction of the 10 family, and then I start the second one within 12 months of that period. Would that be acceptable to you?
What we're thinking is it's going to be right next door.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've been wonderful about
Did you guys hear that?
listening to our concerns and truly, really hearing what we have to say. And knowing that construction is going to be right next to us, right next door, 10 feet away, we were hoping to have those completed prior to the rest of the construction so that we have what Cindy put so well as calm and quality of life preservation, since it's right beside us. So we were hoping those could be done so that as we watch the rest of that unfold, we don't continue to have it
Just not drug out as much.
Right. That was what we were hoping to find tonight.
Based on this discussion, we will ask for a revised proposed development schedule before the conclusion of the Stage 2 plans. So we will ask that of the developer.
And thank you, by the way, all three of you. They've spent a fair amount of time with us in the last couple of weeks. I met with Craig, I met with Jerry, I met with Beth. So we've kind of been communicating to make sure that they knew what we were putting, you know, in sort of their backyard, even though we feel we've done you know, the architects and the engineers did a nice job of separating. When the initial plans were sent to Cindy, I got a call 2 days later because the first plan that we submitted didn't quite have, you know, the changes that we initially proposed. So she's been great in being involved, in Kirk and everyone else on this side of it, in communicating with us what would really help convey to you guys and the neighbors what it is we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to develop a nice high-end quality of development here. And again, the neighbors have been great. So I'm willing to accommodate them. We could put some language in there that makes them comfortable. We're happy with that.
We would appreciate that. I think it would make the, you know, what's happening easier for us to absorb right next door.
No question. No question.
Okay, so I think we're just kind of recapping, we're doing a commitment to pull to progress the development schedules for the 2-family units within the lookout, so that construction begins in 2019 as opposed to 2020, and that those units be completed before construction begins on the multifamily structure.
Not before, it'll be in, I'm sorry, it will be, we're going to be doing them at the same time.
Right.
But you want those as part of our first phase.
Yeah, we would
That's what
like to
you're
have
asking
those
for.
completed as soon as possible in that phase.
Can I ask a question kind of about ownership and just feel here? I've been pleased on, you know, the more recent data we're looking at and how many feet we're going on board. My big fear is that projections and modeling of that is changing every day, and because of real or perceived issues with how much that river is going to rise over time, that our city dumps a bunch of money in developments that people get scared away from. So I'm confident in the data and what we're doing here with the architecture, but just want to feel of what's going on down there when a house comes online. What are we seeing? What kind of interest are we seeing from people? How fast are these things going?
We just put our first bit of advertising out less than a month ago, and I spoke to the broker on the way in here. This is what they want. They love this. I mean, these guys are paying $3,000 a month in rent in some of the other areas, but there's no place where they can really move that's on the river. So we've got really positive response. And these are high-end, like Jeff, for instance, lives paying $4,000 a month for rent in, what building were you in, the Radius? I mean, it's absurd. You know, he's going to move down, he's going to be one of our neighbors. Now, we've had some objection from the other neighbors, but we're still, but we think we got Jeff over the hump last night on that. So, in reality, this is the kind of thing we're hoping to see is, you know, even our own are kind of coming over on our side. And we're excited about this, and we think we're giving a lot of alternatives to what is down the street, and a much better looking, you know, these buildings aren't super high, they're 3-story buildings. It's not like we're building these massive structures, you know, to get the people in. Now, I don't mind that a little further down where the tapestry is, and what we're doing on the front side behind the levee is probably the biggest we're ever going to get, but those are going to be really high-end units as well. And we only have 9 people on the floor there, so we think this is creating a, you know, a real want for me down there. Let's put it.
And we're also having public access and some mixed-use development with the trails and all of that.
Oh, that's going to be the best part of it. When those trails go in.
With regard to your concerns, because I am kind of coming in on this late, it sounds like that those 4 units right next to you, they go in the first phase, those get sold, things quiet down for you. That sounds to me like that's kind of ground zero what you want. Okay. What happens to those 2 lots on the other side of you?
They're privately purchased right now,
The-
so,
There, somebody owns them?
yes.
Yes,
Yes.
lots 1 and
And
2.
somebody's gonna build on them?
Yes, well, it's proposed, yeah, we actually talked to them just about a month ago.
And
so,
we have seen his plans and have approved his plans.
All right,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
are satisfied as current residents about the situation as we're discussing it tonight?
As much
That's
as
the
we
main
can
thing.
be. It's an obvious change from when we purchased, but we're happy with the quality that's being presented. And so that's why we were hoping we could we know it's gonna look good next to us. So if we can get that done, as you said, then it would be better than having all of that happen and then tucking those in later. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that that's,
I want to kind of emphasize the original concept that was brought forward. This developer had this same multifamily structure here, right adjacent to the single-family home.
And Cindy said
As staff for this planning commission, we rejected that right out of the chute.
I've got a bruise right here, March 15th.
Because we want to see that same transition that we saw from the commons, transitioning from the larger buildings down to the two-family and then the single-family homes. We want to see that same transition back up. We recognize the market is for the condominium units now, but we want to really make sure that we're getting that same item. And then kind of along that line, let me see if I can find you the images here. When we start to look at, this is a cross-section of these duplexes. So you actually come into the duplexes and, one unit will kind of enter here, another one will enter right here. They're side by side, they share a common driveway coming in. So when you kind of look at them from the curb, they're going to look like a really large single-family home. But they're actually going to be two-family homes.
And the massing on those, if you look at this height of the two families that we're doing, it's virtually the same height as the 10-family next to it. So it's not this big jump that you're gonna see. That was something we explained to them last night, and they've got a deck on the top of their second floor. Their view is virtually gonna be unimpeded. I mean, I think you're gonna, we're not really gonna bother you in terms of that. Even the next buildings down aren't really gonna affect you. It's not until that hill starts to slope up where it becomes more of but then it's, 500 feet away.
Let's see if I can get you a better image here to kind of give you what that's going to look like.
We've done a lot of looking.
Bear with me here for a minute, I know I'm scrolling. I will give, I'm grateful that, so this is some of your single-family structures right here. This is the single-family home.
That's their house.
That's us.
That's their,
Okay, these are some of the single-family homes that are actually down there now, so you can see these are the larger common homes, where you can see kind of the courtyard coming in, and then, let's go back up. So then this is your four-family structure that we saw in the commons. And then this would be
That's
kind
the
of
rear of the
multi- that's-
10-family.
That's the rear of the 10-family.
By rear, you mean Riverside?
Riverside. A lot of people call that the front.
So I hope that helps you kind of grasp.
So the two families that you're referring to right on, next to their lots, are they one or two floors of living space?
2 floors.
Okay, so it's one above the other.
That's right.
Gotcha.
There's no third floor on those. They actually have a third floor. They're gonna look above our roof lines on our building. And we've kept within the traditional architecture on these. We want to go a little bit, as we move away, we're probably gonna get just a little bit more sleek in the design, but for these, where they're all gabled and pitched roofs and, not flat top roofs until we get a little further away. So it will look very in keeping with what's there.
We're seeing some architectural significance with the windows. We are seeing, some of the metal work, particularly some of the copper elements mixed into this, very similar to what we see in the commons and lookout as well. And again, they have to meet the county law. And it's very strong. We have to carry this theme through of that same feature.
Just a minor aside, behind that garage, so now we're working from Manhattan Harbor Boulevard, I guess Boulevard, is that what it's called? Boulevard. You see a garage, behind that garage, but on the river side, is there living space on that same floor as the garage, or is it just all garage?
We would expect some, no, there is
There's living space on behind both garages.
Oh, yeah, oh, okay, so there is, so on that river side, you know, that's controlled, heated, living.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's 2,000, and her square footage is a little bit off, because we've modified these plans a little bit, but the smallest unit's over 2,000 square feet, and the big ones go up to 2,600 square feet. So these are not insignificant units. They're 3 and 4 bedroom units. They're actually beautiful. So, very tastefully done, really nice finishes on the front and exterior of the building, as well as the inside. So it's not going to be too much different than what the neighbors currently have.
Will they have usable outside, like decking and things like that on the riverside?
There'll be a patio on both units on the back. And in addition to that, what we did is instead of doing these on the 40-foot wide lots, we knew it would be hard to kind of squeeze that on there, so we took 3 lots, which are 120 feet wide, and cut it in half. So these are actually wider lots for these units than what was traditionally proposed. So it gives you a little bit wider breadth on the front of the building.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding traffic patterns, wouldn't it be helpful if Route 8 were available to the development? I mean, you could go out Route 8 up right to Fort Thomas and the
I'll defer to Cindy and Kirk on that.
27 unit and so forth.
Okay,
I mean, it's a mess now. Is there any way to put pressure on the state to have that?
The challenge that we have with the state and with Route 8 improvements is there are conflicting, it's a long story, but the state has no money.
Right.
And so all transportation projects right now are struggling because there are no improvements.
Right.
The Route 8 is a state route.
Yeah.
The Transportation Cabinet, by their charter, protects the interstates first and keeps the flow of traffic free-flowing on the interstate. Route 8 in and of itself needs to have improvements that are probably more desirable to Bellevue and Dayton, whereas if you went to the Transportation Cabinet and said fix it, they would actually, their fix would be, okay, let's get rid of all on-street parking and just make a free flow of traffic going all the way down.
Right.
And there's got to be a compromise between the two. I know the cities of Bellevue and Dayton have been talking recently about collaborating together to try to make some improvements and get some concepts out there. It is in the long-range plans for the Transportation Cabinet to do some type of analysis in there, but Dayton and Bellevue both need to be a very active partner in those improvements.
I just thought, if I lived down there and I lived down towards the harbor and so forth, I'd want to go out that way and out Route 8 and up through Fort Thomas and out to the expressway that way if I was going south, than coming through town.
Okay, bear with me for a minute. I'm going to try to get an image shown here that'll kind of address your other question here. I know, but I share with you, Route 8 is an adventure. I stretched this a little bit wide, but I think that's a 4-family one?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want the duplex?
I thought I had the duplex in here. Okay. This is a duplex one, or a 4-family one, as opposed to a duplex, but I just kind of want to show it to you because it's somewhat similar in terms of you'll see the garage is out front, and then you'll go back into a living space that's on the back side of it that's really taking
Yeah,
advantage
that's
of those river views. But this is actually family structures. And that's somewhat similar to what you see with the lookout and the riverfront commons both. You see, garages, but you also see a gateway entrance coming in. And then once you enter into the homes, I don't know if everybody here has had an opportunity to walk through any of these homes when they were under construction. Once you get into them, then you'll they open up into really taking advantage of the view of the river. And that's really the high marketability of these homes. I would encourage a field trip, and we can do that as part of our continuing education for this planning commission to go through that in the future.
Oh, we've got a building behind the levee right now too. If you want, the next month or two, maybe Mike or somebody can help me arrange to get your names. I'll happily give you a walkthrough of what we've done there. We think it's incredible. Mike came through there a couple months ago. I mean, it's amazing. Every unit faces the river. There's a lot of life out there. It's really, we've embraced it, obviously, so.
So a question of kind of a general nature. So let's fast forward. Whether schedules are hit or not, that's not really what I'm after. So all of these different pieces are complete. We have the tapestry, that's in business, happening. All of this efforts, phases are done. What's left down there after that? Is there anything, is there any more development? Is Harbor, I'm just kind of curious of what, after we get done with these, now what is left? I know it's not salient to this project, but it's kind of salient to what we're going to have.
Okay, so this is kind of your concept that we have here. So we've gone through detailed plans for this site here.
Okay.
We've gone through details here, all the way through the commons, all the way through the lookout. You've now done the narrows.
Okay.
The signature site, you have not seen detailed stage ones, and that would be a pretty extensive mixed-use development in there. And then, bear with me here, I'm going to jump back out. Then when you get into your overarching, so that kind of gets us from here all the way over to here. Then you have this large parcel here, which is really something that the city of Dayton has been working heavily on, as to how they want to envision that lot to be. And that's still kind of a work in progress. So you really got your anchor signature site here, and then your other anchor site next to the marina, which are really the next two pieces to work on. As of right now, I would say that your signature site is probably farther along than your anchor near the marina. That's still kind of a little bit of the clunky end of it, although the marina itself has undergone some dramatic changes in terms of the care of a marina in the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, since this project started, it has really, it's taken a lot of behind-the-scenes items that unless you operate out of a marina, you don't really realize the day-to-day functions of it. So we've done a lot of work down there to get that up to a higher-end facility that will complement the rest of this development.
So if I understand you correctly, much of the known residential will be done, much of it.
Will be in the plan, yes.
Yep. And so therefore, if we go back down to the west end of this, by the time these 3 different efforts you have going on, that will actually be developed all the way around to that kind of yellow.
Yeah, this is
Yellow
from the
thing.
dark green
Okay.
all the way over to the red brick.
Now, the tapestry is
That's
the
this one right
project
here.
below the vistas there. I mean, on this.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
So,
this is where the tapestry is. Right?
And they own part of that lime green. Theirs actually goes into that a bit, doesn't it, Paul?
Yeah, there's only 4 acres left between ours
So-
right now.
Yeah.
So the amounts left to be finished are 4 acres on each end, the bookends, basically. And-
Right.
And there might be some other stuff around the marina, but that's some years down.
And if all goes well, we as folks reviewing this can assume that this should be completed 2025, 6, 7, 8, I mean, in mid-late 20s.
That's,
I mean,
Fair
it's
enough.
all contingent upon how, you know, the economy still
Oh, yeah,
is going
yeah.
strong, you know. We
No
did not, we
recessions.
did not anticipate the hiccup that occurred, you know, right as this concept was really starting to come forward. Nobody could have predicted that.
And that's
So-
fair, I mean, you can't, I mean, if
Yeah.
anybody here knows what the economy is gonna do, I really want to talk.
our goal would be to do 15 to 20% of what our overall plan is over, you know, we're talking about 5 to 7 year period. And it's all based on market conditions, of course.
Understood, I mean, sure. And we're gonna have a recession sometime, it's gonna happen.
There are always cycles that go
They
up and
always
down.
do.
That's the other thing we really like about what we're doing, we're not just building some massive structures. You know, if something not exactly right goes on with the economy, we're not out there with 50 units that we're holding on to that are, nobody's living in, like we have people got trapped with before. We've got a few units to sell in each phase, not 50 or 75 units.
And that is critical to the development schedule, which is one of the reasons why we ask for a schedule, because we don't want, you know, 50 owner-occupied units to come on the market at the exact same time.
Understood.
You won't get the sale value that you need. This is not a traditional single-family home development. This is a very unique development that Dayton gets to be blessed with.
Thank you.
I would like to add, while everybody's here, just for the opportunity, and to kind of piggyback on what Roy said and to answer a little bit more. I'm Michael Giffen, I'm the city administrator. But you're correct, most of what would fill in after this is on the far west side and the far east side. I will note, there is 18 acres south of the marina there that you see, that big green space that is owned and controlled by Nelson Stark. That is part of Manhattan Harbor. So there is quite a bit of acres there, even south of the marina, that will be developed. What that will be, it's still yet to be known. Little less known, there is actually some acreage south of the flood wall, mostly around just west of the Berry Street access point that is developable as well. So areas south of the flood wall are actually in the development footprint as well. What areas can actually be built on is probably less than you see there, but as Brendan's already done, he's already got the one project, the Gateway, under construction. There is
And
some.
we own the 7 acres behind the levee, we have no current plans back there now. That would be a future.
So there is, yeah, this will fill out a lot of the middle section. There is, but still some substantial land to be developed south of the marina and even some parts south of the flood wall, so.
Cindy, there's approximately 6 lots at the very beginning that's owned by River City Marina LLC. And they've got a sign up to sell, I think, 5 of them. What is that zone for currently?
Okay, this is all zone mixed land use, which is the underlying zone for Manhattan Harbor. Let me go back. So that's basically what we would refer to as the signature site. You're talking this area right in
Yeah.
here. And this is one of the original concept plans, and I just kind of want to emphasize it did go all the way down and cover that green space area that Michael was referring to before.
It was approved for the transitional style buildings before we bought 7, 8, and 9. So it's going to be much the same and over until it gets to the 3 acres.
But
on the
it
end.
concerns me it's up for sale, so whoever buys it is going to want to do something. What are they able to do with it?
They're going to have to come through the same process that everyone else is doing,
Okay.
coming through. That particular site, we will expect very heavily to be a mixed-use development. It does need to have some Anchorage retail that's, maybe it's restaurants, community gathering areas, things that are cohesive for a large community like this. So we would anticipate that to be the mixed-use development. We refer to that area as the signature site. We really see that as being a very inviting area to the entire community. And really looking for it to be a statement site.
have one final question. And this is really from elected officials, Michael. There are other people who live there. We have some neighbors, but are there any comments that we ought to know about with regard to this project as it relates to some of the other people that live down there? I'm not asking you so much to speak for them, as I'm more asking about, you know, any suggested concerns that we should know about more than anything.
Everybody that I've spoken to is here tonight.
Okay, so these other,
I haven't heard from anybody else.
these other folks, not a peep.
I personally haven't heard of Brendan, might be able to speak.
I wouldn't say not a peep. A couple of the people are out of town, or they would probably been here tonight.
Okay.
I have spoken with them. In fact, I even put out a little document kind of telling them what I knew from talking to Brendan and from talking to Cindy. One lady went ballistic when she heard the word duplex, and that's why I brought it up, because that was a perception thing, right? I mean, but I will say this, my personal view is that I think now that I've heard all of the facts, I feel a lot better about what's being built. And it's going to be high-end, it's going to be quality. We're trying to do the right thing here. It's not what we had bargained for maybe in the beginning, that we're going to have more single-family homes, but at least we're going to have high-quality, high-end buildings. And Cindy and Brendan and everybody we've talked to, Michael, we're trying to do the right thing here and do right by the people that are already there, and invested a lot already in this neighborhood. So I think at this point, I think the overall feeling is that we feel much better now that we've gotten all the facts.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. I will go back and point out on the signature site, there is language in your pattern book that does kind of drive that whole site as well. So they're going to be subject to the same conditions in the pattern book on that site as well. And that says 5 acres in the, or 5 acres in the beginning. Okay. All right, so I think we're
S1P28.
You are at the point where if you wanted to entertain the lookout, if you wanted to put any additional conditions on there, I am happy to type them in, but you'll get to see the glory of Cindy's typing skills, which are not the best. So right now, we have a staff recommendation to approve the submitted stage 1 plans for the lookout at Manhattan Harbor. The supporting and basis for the recommendations, it's similar to what we said before, consistent with the stage 1 plan requirements for the City of Dayton zoning. The proposed improvements are also consistent with the Manhattan Harbor pattern book as amended.
I will make a motion to approve the submitted stage 1 plans for the lookout at Manhattan Harbor based upon supporting information and the basis of recommendation of staff.
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Roy Newman.
Aye.
Carl Roth.
Aye.
Danny Tressel.
Aye.
Thomas Haddock.
Aye.
Jeff Haas.
Aye.
Tanner, yes. Aye. Anthony Hales, aye. Motion passes. It's approved.
Okay. We will, as discussed tonight, go back through the development schedule as part of the stage 2 plan submittals, particularly paying attention to the stage for the 2-family homes, going under construction in the lookout area and the timing of those.
Thank you.
Did Michael or Cindy, did you guys have any administrative items?
The only other item that, I'm sorry.
Just canceling, probably likely canceling the special meeting we had scheduled
Yeah,
for
so
April
we
17th.
did have a special meeting initially scheduled for April the 17th. We have not advertised it that. Given how productive you have been tonight, we will cancel that special meeting. So we will not be meeting on April the 17th. That has been canceled. The other item that I would just kind of bring up, thank you for being our new chair. As the chair's prerogative and talking with your members, is 7 o'clock an appropriate time, or do you like to have an earlier time?
I'm fine with 7.
Okay, with 7.
Okay.
there's no other business to bring up, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Aye. So adjourned.
I can't.